Hi everyone, this is Tevi live from room 114. We are on JFK part 2 looking at his role in the Cold War. So let's begin with containing communism. So this first one, guys, is called a more flexible response. So what you guys need to know for this is the timing. You know, Kennedy took office during a time of global instability. There was a huge increase, guys, in nationalism in the developing world, right? So there were countries struggling to get their independence, and so the Soviet Union, was backing them. They were actively supporting what they called wars of national liberation. So remember, this worried us because of the Cold War and the spread of communism. So Kennedy, guys, felt that Eisenhower relied too heavily on nuclear weapons. So shown here on the left, guys, is a picture of a nuclear warhead. So he felt that a different approach was needed. So he pushed for a buildup of troops and conventional weapons, to allow for, other countries to resist communism. So he expanded special forces, guys, this elite army unit to wage guerrilla warfare. And so they were known as the Green Berets. They wore a distinctive hat. So I have them pictured over here on the right. All right, before we go on to number 2, on your guided notes, guys, I think you just want to fill in, so where it says, instead he pushed for buildup of troops and conventional weapons. This was to allow for, a more flexible response, right? Instead of going all or nothing with nuclear weapons, a flexible response, we'd be able to use weapons that, weren't going to destroy the whole world. So just fill that in on your note, and let's go on to number 2, guys, aid to other countries. And so, I have here a picture of Kennedy in Venezuela. And so, as president, guys, he wanted to renew diplomatic focus on Latin America. So governments there, guys, were, often corrupt in the hands of the wealthy. And many citizens, guys, lived in extreme poverty, which then would spur, leftist movements to overthrow those governments. So when we would get involved, guys, before Kennedy, poor Latin Americans would resent our intrusion because it was really kind of seen as imperialism, as us taking them over. And so, guys, Kennedy proposed this Alliance for Progress, which really were a series of cooperative aid projects, with Latin American governments. And so this was designed to create, more stable governments that would be able to resist communist revolutions. This is a huge commitment over a 10-year period, guys. Fill in, the U.S. pledged $20 billion to help Latin America establish things like schools, housing, healthcare, and fairer land distribution. Did it work? So in some countries like Venezuela, pictured here, also Chile, Colombia, reform, was actual and real. But guys, in other countries, so local rulers would just keep the money, right, and keep themselves in power. Alright, guys, so this got a little cut off here, but I'm just going to show you another picture from this time in Latin America. It was called a Marshall Plan. If you guys remember, during our World War II unit, in the early Cold War years, remember, we sent a lot of money to Europe. So, our focus now was Latin America, and there are some of the countries that I mentioned that were benefited. So this slide just kind of reviews your guided notes. So, here's the picture of Kennedy with some of the Latin American rulers, and his enduring legacy, the Peace Corps. So it was aimed at helping less developed nations fight poverty. It sent Americans to provide humanitarian services in less developed nations. So after rigorous training, volunteers would spend 2 years in countries that needed assistance. So they would fix sewage treatments, centers, they would train medical technicians, they would teach English, even help build houses and roads. Today it is still quite active, as I mentioned in my earlier screencast. It is definitely one of his enduring legacies that we still have today. So here are some pictures you guys can look at from this era. So here's just its promise, to promote a better understanding of all peoples in the other parts of the world. Well, here's a short little clip we'll look at tomorrow in class from the JFK library, which I just found out. Juniors, you're going to go to that place for a field trip at the end of school. Pretty cool. So here he is, Kennedy, meeting with some of the Peace Corps volunteers. Here's their advertisement. What in the world are you doing? Remember his inauguration speech? Here's them trying to get some new volunteers, helping, remember, the poor, helping them with basic construction, land, water. And here's where some of the places that volunteers were sent. And remember, I was in Central Asia. All right, let's get to space. So guys, in number 4, second page, in 1961, guys, Yuri Gagarin, that's G-A-G-A-R-I-N, became the first person to orbit Earth. The Soviets also had launched Sputnik, the first satellite, in 1957, so it was clear, guys, that the U.S. Was losing in the space race. So Soviets were clearly showing their superiority, and so Kennedy kind of worried that this Soviet success in space might, show the world that communism was better than democracy. So guys, he soon gave a famous speech to Congress, setting the goal of landing a man on the moon before the end of the decade. So here he is giving that famous speech to be the first to put the man on the moon. So right away, guys, he gets going. In 1962, John Glenn becomes the first American to orbit Earth. And 3 years later, guys, the U.S. sends the capsule called the Apollo, which is launched using the Saturn V, the most powerful rocket ever built. So guys, Saturn was able to give both Apollo and the lunar module later on enough velocity to reach the moon. So here's the strong rocket, Saturn, and so by the end of the decade, the lunar module is known as the Eagle, and here's your 3 famous astronauts: Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins. This here's a picture actually of Buzz. Alright guys, so on your guided notes, again, just fill out, it was able to give, so remember the Saturn was able to give the lunar module, the Eagle, enough velocity. So it was 1969, guys, of July. So the Eagle was carrying your 3 astronauts, Armstrong, Aldrin, and Collins. And Armstrong's famous words, that's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. So those famous words put down, so that really shows that we had successfully won the space race. It just took, until 1969, but it definitely was launched with Kennedy's passion and commitment. Alright guys, and lastly, the Bay of Pigs. So guys, this is starts to really worry the U.S. for even before Kennedy, guys. In 1959, you have Fidel Castro, pictured there on the right, had overthrown the corrupt Cuban dictator Fulgencio Batista, pictured there on the left. So guys, after this, Castro established ties with the Soviet Union and started drastic land reform, even seized foreign-owned businesses, many of which were American. The Soviet premier, guys, Nikita Khrushchev, he was also showing interest in strengthening Cuba's military. And so with this, guys, Eisenhower authorized the CIA to secretly train Cuban exiles known as La Brigada to invade the island. So La Brigada. So they were hoping this invasion would set off an uprising against Castro. Alright guys, so Kennedy comes to office and he agreed to these plans. So April 17th, 1961, they launch the invasion of 14,000 armed Cuban exiles. So put that down after 1961 of April 17th. And so their exile lands in the Bay of Pigs, which is south coast of Cuba. Guys, you need to know that this invasion was a complete disaster. So put down that the boats, guys, got stuck on the coral reefs. Kennedy even canceled air support to try to keep our involvement a secret, so they had no backup. The uprising never happened against Castro. And Castro's forces, guys, killed almost all the members of La Brigada. So guys, this was a dark moment for the Kennedy administration. It really showed the public that their own government was plotting to overthrow a neighbor's government, 90 miles away. And these disastrous results also made us look weak and disorganized. So you can see here the number captured and killed, and we had to pay to get the prisoners released. Alright guys, and we'll just finish up with some pictures. Here's Kennedy with some of the Cuban exiles from La Brigada. There's his brother Robert negotiating. Alright guys, I am done with your guided notes, part 2 of JFK, so 1 through 5. I'm going to go over some of these clips tomorrow of the Bay of Pig invasion, and we're going to be starting the 13 Days, a movie which shows the Cuban Missile Crisis. It's awesome. So hope you guys do your homework, and I will see you all tomorrow. This is Tevi signing off.